In the next example, we are going to try to create a simple tic-tac-toe game of two users. And it says that, they declare the winner as soon as any player wins. Now, if you do not know what a tic-tac-toe game is, it's actually the simple X and zeros which we used to play in our childhood. The idea over here is to use a 2D array. So, we had this 2D array, and let's say the first player would put an X, the second player has option to put a 0 anywhere over here. So let's say the user puts 0 over here. So what we need is, first of all, the position where the user wants to put in. So we need the row and the column, and then based on which user it is, we are going to put a X at that particular place. Now the user 1 again has the option to put X anywhere over here. So let's say the user 1 puts it over here. So now every time the user puts the move at any particular place, then we are supposed to say whether that user has won the game or not. So what we will do is, as soon as the user would put an X over here, we would want to see that if there is an X in this particular row or not, if there is all X in this particular column or not, or if there is X in the two diagonals. But since this X is not in a particular diagonal, then we would not check it. Now in the next move, whenever the second user wants to play it, the user, let's say, would put it over here. So now over here, we would want to check again, if there are all zeros in a particular row. But then in this row, we would see that, there are still, empty cells, and, we would not declare the winner over here. Then we would check the column, and here again, there is going to be one X, and then, finally we will see if it is there in the diagonal or not. But no, it is not there, so we are not going to check the diagonal. Now again, if we try to give the control to the user 1, and the user 1, let's say, chooses to put X over here, then again we are going to check if X is present in this particular column, but we see that it's not all X. Then in this row it's not all X, and in the cross diagonal, then we are going to check the cross diagonal, but then the cross diagonal is not all X, and even this diagonal is not all X. So the winner is not yet declared. Then we pass the control to the user 2, and then the user 2 would put, let's say, a 0 over here, and then again we are going to check the column, the row, and whether it's in any diagonal position or not. But the winner cannot be declared over here as well. Now the user 1 has the option to put X in any of the empty places. So now the user 1 puts an X over here. We are going to check if the column has all X, no, the row has all X, no, but the diagonal has all X. So we do have the winner, which is user 1 over here, and then we would stop the game and declare the winner to be user 1. This is how we are going to do. Now how are we going to check the row, the column, and the diagonals is something which we have to think about while we are coding. So here I created my class tic-tac-toe, and the first thing which we want to add a convention over here is that obviously in our 2D array we cannot put X and zeros. So as a convention, what I would have is a 0 to be 0 and an X to be 1. So wherever we have X, we would put 1, and wherever we would have 0, we would put 0. Or how would we show that the place is empty? So instead we put a 0 for empty, for X we put 1, and for 0 let's put -1. So this is how I would have my 2D array populated. So let's create a 2D array over here. So this is going to contain int, and then we have a 2 dimension, and then this is going to be the board of the tic-tac-toe, and this we are just creating new int, and then let's just have it 3 by 3 for now. So we have a 3 by 3 board. Now what I want to do is I want to always alternate between two users. So before that, let's try to actually gain some input from the user. So for that, as we saw that we could use the scanner object, and we are going to take the position, and we are going to take the row and the column wherein the user would want to input. So for that, again, we would put in system.in, and then we would do an sc.nextInt. But before that, we need to import the scanner from Java util, and then we are going to have, everything from this particular object. We can now call sc.nextInt. But now, as you can see over here, there is some problem happening. And why is that so? Because I missed a very important thing, and that's actually the creation of main, and everything begins with main, right? So we need to actually put all of this in the main. But in fact, the board is definitely going to be something which is common to the entire class, and also, the scanner object. So let's actually take this out and put this over here as variables of this class. And now inside our main, I'm trying to use this scanner object to now take input from the user. Now I'm still not able to do, and if you can see that, there is a red mark over here, and the reason for that is we need to change this to static. What we need to do is that we need to use this particular object only in the static context, because main has static. So now we would use a nextInt over here, and this is going to give us the integer. So now, for example, the first thing which I want to take from the user is going to be the row. So I'll put it in int row. And the next thing which I want to do is take the column from the user. So I'm going to put it in int col, and this is what I'm going to, give the message to the user as well. Input the next move row, and similarly I would ask for the column. So input the next move column. So now I know that a particular user can input the row and can input the column. This is exactly where I would want to put the user's mark on. So now in our board, in the row and in the column, this is where I want to put the mark. Now what is going to be the mark? That depends on who is the player. So let's say we have a player over here, and that's exactly what I'm going to put. So now there has to be two players. So the first player would be inputting 1, which is x, and the next player would be inputting -1. So what I can do is I can actually check if the player is equal to 1. Because if the player was equal to 1, now the player has to change, right? So the player now has to become -1. So this is how I would, change the player. But we have not yet defined player, and that's why it is giving an error, right? So first let's define player, and we'll do that over here. We have integer player, and let's just, put this equal to 1, because, we always begin with the player, with the player who's going to put the x in the board first. So we have this player, and this is 1, and now this player has to be static. So we'll just, change the player, into static, and this is because, we are doing it in a static context of main. So that's why, if the player is 1, then change the player. Otherwise, if the player is -1, then we'll have to change the player to 1. So how do we do that? So here, this is a check only if the player is 1. So basically what we want to do is we want to toggle between the players. For this, let's actually just use a simple if else. So if player is equal to 1, then we actually change the player to -1, else we have the player to be 1. And the reason for this is the player can only be 1 and -1, right? So if the player was -1, then now the player should be 1. So this is the whole thing. And now what we want is that this player should be able to make the move to this particular row and column and put the corresponding number at that particular position. But now this is giving an error just because the board is also supposed to be static. So let's put the static over here, and now, we'll be able to change the board position. So let's see if our code is working fine till now. Let's try to run this. So now it's just asking us to make the first move. So I'll just put a 0 by 0. And what we have is that, the player, which is 1, is actually putting the move to the board. But what is going to be the move? So for that, we actually want some method which is going to print our entire board for us. So I'm actually going to create a new method to print board. So I'm going to call it print board, and I'm passing the board over here. And what this method should actually do is just, sys out the entire board. So I'm just creating this method over here. It just changed it to board 2, but I'm just going to keep it board. And what we really want is to actually now output everything inside the board. So what I'll do is I'm going to begin from I equal to 0, I less than what? Board dot length. Okay, because this is actually going to, give us the whole length of the board, in terms of row. And this is going to be I++. Within this, I will create another loop, which is now going to pass through the number of columns in the board. Okay, so I'm going to do int j equal to 0, j less than board. And now for this, I really need the first row, and then I'm going to find the length of the first row. That's actually going to give me the number of columns in this particular row. And then this is going to be j++. And then we have this board, I and j. This is what we want to output. So we'll just do a sys out, and then we are going to output this. So we'll cut this thing from here, put this over here. So let's try to now see what was the thing in the board. So when I run this, and again, I would want to make a move 0, 0, it gives us an exception. And the exception says that array index out of bound. Index 3 of the out of bounds for the length 3. So now here there is an issue. The issue is that we went on from 0 to the entire length, but actually we would have gone to length -1. So this is the change which I would make. I'll try to run this again. Again, I'm going to put 0, and here again it gives us the same issue. So here again I'm using I, and that's the problem which I was having. Let me try to run this again. So now it gives us only 4 values, and it actually put -1. So now this is the big thing, which I see over here, because we wanted to actually put 1. And the reason is because we actually are making a move after we have switched the player. So instead, let's make a move first and then switch the player. Okay. So when I would have done this, and if I try to run this, and I try to now input what I want to do. So now we do have 1 over here. But now as you can see, what we really want is a proper way of printing. And this is not a proper way of printing, right? So what I want to see is just a print. I do not want a new line. And, after every element, I just want a space. And then once my inner loop is done, then in my outer loop, what I want is a new line. So let me just put brackets over here for your understanding. So we have this particular line executed within the inner loop, and then after the inner loop is closed, then I want to create a new line. And the reason for this is because I want to add a new line every time my row completes. So if one row completes, then we need a new line, and then we want to keep doing that. So let me try to print this again. Let's try to see what we get now. And now instead of a 3 by 3 matrix, we have a 2 by 2 matrix printed over here. And now I realize that the change which I made over here from I to j, that was the problem. The length was not an issue. So let me just get it back, because we are not doing a less than equal to, so that should not be an issue. Now let's try to put the move. So now correctly we have an X in our board. So that's the first win which we got, that we are able to put things in this particular place in the board. Now the next thing what we need to do is we need to actually do this continuously until a winner is announced. So, before, doing anything, let me actually create a winner. So this is again going to be static integer, and this is going to be a winner. And right now there is no winner. So let's put it to be 0, because this means that, the game is going on. So winner equal to 0 means the game is going on. Once the winner becomes 1 or -1, we would know who the winner is. So we need to keep looping this until the winner becomes somebody else other than 0. So what do we need to keep doing something until something happens. If you think carefully, we can actually use a while loop over here. So now we would use a while loop, and we are going to check while winner is 0, then we keep doing these things. Okay, we can keep doing these things. But now if I try to run this program will go in infinite loop. And why is that so? The reason is because when I actually keep checking, if the winner is 0, it is always going to be true, right? I have not updated the winner anywhere. So now whenever we are trying to make a move, this is the place where we do the move. After this, we want to check the winner. After every move, we want to check the winner. But how do we check the winner? The winner would be if this same attribute is there for all elements in the row, for all elements in the column, and for the diagonals as well. So now instead of making it too complicated in the beginning, let me actually only declare the winner if the entire row is having, this player. So I would actually want to check for all the columns, right? So I would do an int I equal to 0, I less than both 0 dot length I plus plus. And then within this loop, I just want to keep checking if the board I for that particular column is equal to player or not. And if this board I equal to player, then I want to say that this is going to be the winner. But then it may be that only the first one is the player, and the remaining two are not the player. So what am I going to do? I can actually have a count. If the count is equal to 3, then it's going to be the winner, right? Because for all the 3 columns in this particular row, we want that this player should be present. All x's are there or all zeros are there. So what we were doing is we were actually checking for all the columns in this particular row. So the row is going to be constant, but the column is actually going to be variable over here. So it's supposed to be board row, and then for each column we are going to check if it is equal to player, and then we are going to increase the count of the score. Okay, so I'm going to do a score plus plus, but we have not yet given the score, right? So the score would be equal to 0. So let's just have an int score over here. It's going to be equal to 0. I am going to increase the score every time the board row I equal to player. But now I want to check if the score is equal to 3, then my winner is going to be this particular player. Else what would happen? I want to toggle the player. This is what I want to put in my else if the winner is not yet declared. Okay, and as soon as the winner is declared, you will see that my while loop will break. Okay, so what I really need to do is every time one of the rows has the same thing, that is going to be the winner. Now I forgot a semicolon over here. Now why do I put a score over here? Because I always want to have my score 0 before I start doing something. Okay, so my score is definitely supposed to be 0 before we start checking who the winner is. So let's try to run this and try to play the game now, just by seeing if the row is the element which is giving us the winner. So when I try to run this, and let's say I make a move at the first position, and this is where the move has started. Now again we can give another move. Now this is going to be the user 2 who's going to do that. So let's say the user 2 just gives it to the second row and the first column. So this is how the board looks like now. Now the user 1, I would just put it in the first row in the second column. Now this is how the board looks right now. Now the user 2 has the option, right? So the user 2 is wanting to do, let's say for example, the second column and the second row. We have this particular board. Now the user 1 has an option, so I would put the first row and the third column. Okay, so this is how we have the board right now. And now, as you can see, the program terminated. The program terminated and it is not asking me to input the next move because it already got the winner. So what we would do is, so when the score is 3, that time we are declaring the winner, right? That's where we would also output who the winner is. So we would say the game has ended, the winner is, and then we would put the player over here. So that's only when we would have an if, right? Because after that we just have an else. So this is what we have over here, and then that way we would have a winner. So the player 1 and the player -1, that's going to be a little bit of confusion right now, but then we are going to actually cater to this later on. So now over here we have actually checked the score, for everything within that particular row. The same thing we want to do for that particular column as well. And similarly, we want to check for the 2 diagonals as well, right? So let's actually try to do the same thing for the column as well. So if we want to have a column, the score has to change, right? So this is going to be a row score. And what we need to do is we need to have a column score as well. So row score equal to 0. Similarly, we need a col score again, equal to 0. And we'll do the same thing for column. So now we will have int I equal to 0, I less than board dot length, I plus plus, if board I col equal to player, then we would change the column score. When we actually check for both rows and columns, then we are going to get the winner. So it's either that, the row score becomes 3 or the column score becomes 3. So in any case, we would have a winner, right? Even if it is row, even if it is column, we are going to have a winner. Now let's try to actually run this and check for a column win. So when I run this, let's start with 0, we have this. Then for the next player, let's put 0, 1, and now let's actually try to put 1, 0. So we have the first column. That's what we are wanting to target. Then for the next player, let's put 1, 1, and now it comes back to the player 1, where we now put 2, 0. So now it say the game has ended, the winner is 1. So the winner is 1, which is the player number 1. So now we have a winner just because we also have the col score to be equal to 3. So now this is working fine. Let me actually print the board just after the move. So this is where we will print the board, so that the board is printed before we display the game has ended, the winner is so and so. If the game does not end, then it would keep on telling the next player to input the next row and next column. So now to make it easy, let's try to actually display who the player is, and then tell the player to input the next row and the next column. So we would just do a simple sysout again. We would just write player, whoever is playing right now, give your next move. So yeah, that's a good way of asking the move from the current player. And now we have this row and column. Now we want to actually check the same way we want to check for the diagonal as well. So now how would we have a diagonal? The diagonal would be beginning again at row 0 and column 0, and it will keep going until every time the row and the column have the same value. So it is either 0, 0 or 1, 1 or 2, 2, right? So what we really need is 2 variables now. So we have int I equal to 0, j equal to 0, and then the condition would be I equal to j, and then we are always going to increment I and j as well. So this is going to give us the diagonal, and we are going to check every time, is ij equal to player? If so, we are going to increase the diagonal score. Again, diagonal score is something which we are going to initialize over here to be equal to 0 initially. So this is how we are actually going to win using the diagonal, and let's actually also add how we would win using the cross diagonal. Okay, so for cross diagonal, again, it's actually supposed to be, if it is 0 row, then the column has to be length minus 1. If it is 0 column, the row has to be length minus 1. So that's exactly what we want to begin with. So we are actually going to begin the row from length minus 1, and then we are going to keep reducing the row and checking if I is equal to j. So I is actually going to be board dot length minus 1. This is where I is going to begin. It's going to be the very last. So now actually this is going to make it from the bottom-most row to the topmost row. So instead of going like this, let's try to actually have the last column and then keep decrementing the column instead of decrementing the row. So we'll begin with the row over here, but here it's going to be board 0 dot length minus 1. So this is how we are going to actually keep incrementing the row but decrementing the column, and every time it should decrement until if I is equal to j. So now here there is a problem. So first of all, there's this error over here. We don't want that. Another thing is that over here it's always going to check for a particular condition before breaking out of the loop. This is not the condition wherein we want to actually break out of the loop. This is the condition which we want to actually put in the if condition, that if I is equal to j, then every time if the board ij is equal to player, and then increase the score, and this should keep on happening. So there is an if within an if, but here we really need a condition, and the condition is that I should be less than the board length, and again j should be less than board 0 dot length. So here in the for loop we cannot have commas while we are checking the condition. So we need that both these conditions should be satisfied. So for that, what do we need? Both the conditions need to be satisfied, else come out of the loop. What do we need for that? We need an and, right? If I is less than board length and j is less than board 0 dot length, then you can go ahead and do things. Similarly over here, this I equal to j is not something which we want over here. This is supposed to be checked within the loop. And how do we actually check the condition of the loop? It's going to be the same as I is less than the board dot length and j is greater than 0. That's what we want, because j can get decremented every time, and we do not want it to go below 0. So it should always be greater than equal to 0. That's exactly where we want it to stop. Okay, so if I is equal to j, is this a condition which we really need over here? Because first of all, this condition is only getting satisfied for the diagonal, right? Not for the cross diagonal. So we don't need that over here. Even if it does satisfy, we don't need it over here. And the reason for that is we are already beginning from 0 and we are already incremented till board dot length. And here again, it's always going to be incremented till board 0 dot length. So every time we know that, I is equal to j, just because it is incrementing at the same time. So it starts from I equal to 0, j equal to 0, and then it keeps on incrementing until the end of the board. And we know that the situation is always going to satisfy. So we don't need that over here. Again, over here we don't need that. Over here we cannot increment the diagonal score. We have to actually increment the cross diagonal score, because that's the last thing which we want to check, right? So again, cross diagonal score equal to 0. This is what we want to use. Now here we have yellow marks just because we have not used them anywhere. So here the last thing which we want to add is for both these conditions, right? The diagonal score should also be equal to, can also be equal to 3, and the cross diagonal score can also be equal to 3. So if any of this case happens, then we are going to declare the winner. But now again, there is an issue over here, because this diagonal score and cross diagonal score, this is something which we only want to check. So basically these loops are some things which we only want to check if the next move is at the diagonal or not, But really, even if we do not actually worry about that, even if, let's say, every time we are checking the diagonal and the cross diagonal, this is going to give us the correct winner, just because any move, if not made at the diagonal or cross diagonal, will not affect the score, right? It will not affect the score. If I'm not making any new move on the diagonal or the cross diagonal, then this is not going to affect the score. So we need not worry about that. So let's try that, if this is really working as we want, or is there some problem in this. So I'm going to run this. So let's try for the diagonal now. So now it's saying, player -1, give your next move. So that's good, right? So we know that, the next player is being asked. So let me just give, 0, 1. And then, from the player 1, I want to give 1, 1. And then from the player -1, I want to give 0, 1. So now here's the issue, right? So it's actually making a move where we do not want to make a move, just because, there was already a move over there. So that's something which we will deal, after we have confirmed if our game is working properly or not. So let's actually add the last move from the player 1, which would be 2, 2. Now it says the game has ended, the winner is 1, and the reason is because, the diagonal is actually complete for the player 1, so we do not worry about the winner getting selected based on the diagonal or the cross diagonal. Let's actually add this particular, concern which we just saw, that, we should not make a move if the move is already made. So we should actually, give some message to the user that, this move is already made. So we are making the move over here, but instead let's check that, if this particular position has 0, then we can make the move. Else we would, want to say that the place is already marked, choose another position. So now after we say that choose another position, we should give the same player a chance, right? So we would not switch between the player, we would not print the board or anything. What we really need to do is we want to actually restart this loop back, okay? So what what we would do is we would say continue. So when we do this, let's try to actually try doing that. So there is some error over here, unreachable code. Oh yes, and the reason for this is every time this continue will be executed, because we do not have brackets after the else, and every time it is going to be executed, and all the remaining code now becomes unreachable. So to avoid that, the compiler is very kind to us to actually point out that we have actually done some mistake over here. And let's try to run this now, and let's try to give the first move from player 1. And now from player -1, I'm giving the same move. But now it says that the place is already marked, choose another position. So player -1, again, give your next move. So this is how, we would actually, go ahead with the game. So instead of doing all of this, I'm actually wanting to just, terminate this. So I'll press on the red button, and then, this is going to get terminated. So now we are good. I believe that, we have implemented a simple tic-tac-toe game with 2 users, and it is declaring the winner, as soon as any player wins. This is how we have implemented it. But really, do you want to show a player 1 and player -1? Why can't we just show player 1 and player 2? So that would change only when we are displaying some message to the user, right? So this particular player out here in this sysout, and the winner is player so and so in this sysout, right? So there we would just, we would want to put another value. So instead of player 1 and -1, let's actually change it to to player 1 and 2, and the reason for that is always we are just checking for the particular player, right? So we need not worry about 1 and -1. We can just put 1 and 2. So over here the idea is that every time we have an x we would put 1, and every time we have a 0 we would put 2. So that's how each player would mark their x and zeros. And let's try to run this, and then we should be having the correct player displayed.